Hello everyone, it's Diane again for another conversation in Let's Have a Conversation series. Today's guest is Nancy Kupiec from Vesta Construction Services. Now Nancy and I have gotten to know each other just a little bit. They're working on a project here right off of Wolf Road. We won't go into it now. I'll let Nancy explain what she's up to, but I'm thrilled that she's agreed to be part of our series. So Nancy, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes. And so where are we sitting right now?
We're sitting in a building that I've owned for about 20 years. It's the Center for Natural Wellness at 3 Cerrone Commercial Drive. We bought it 20 years ago and did some renovations, and pretty much the whole building has been utilized by the Center for Natural Wellness. And now it's taking a different path. They'll still be here, but in less space. So we're going to add housing, a housing component to the building. So that's kind of exciting.
Yeah. Now you're working with another organization to do that.
Yes, the St. Paul's Center. This is a group that I helped set up about 17 years ago. Their mission originally was to find housing and shelter for women and children in mostly the county of Rensselaer. But this project, what we're seeing a need for, is to provide housing, affordable housing, for some of our poorest seniors. So we'll be putting 16 units, 1 bedrooms in this building, and St. Paul Center will be managing it. So they'll be here in offices. It'll be 24/7. They'll have an overnight monitoring person just for emergencies and things like that. But I think it could be a model, is what I'm suggesting, for how we use some of the buildings that you see around here that might become somewhat obsolete because people might not be returning to the offices anymore.
Right.
So, you know, we see fewer and fewer cars parked out here. So it's a sign to me that we're going to have to find a different use for some of these buildings. And this zone, this is a mixed-use zone, which is nice. I think it's ideal for housing opportunities, not only for seniors, but millennials, people who want to maybe live where they work, their home offices. They can eat on Wolf Road. I know I can't cook, so it's unhelpful. And it's close to the airport, so if they travel for their jobs and so on. And a lot of these buildings, they're nicely built like this one, usually brick and block buildings, 1 and 2 story. Some are 3 story. We'll be going up a story on this building. And it's a nice green atmosphere here. It's like a parkway, so I think it's ideal. And so that's what we're up to in this building.
So I know that Colony Senior Service Centers, once you have the building constructed and you have senior, it's women, correct, that you're anticipating?
I think the focus will be on women, but certainly if there's a man who needs housing, they would not turn that person down. I think St. Paul's Center historically has dealt with women and children, but they often deal with the fathers as well. I mean, it's the family, right? So it's not going to be restricted. I'd like to try and see if we could get veterans.
Oh, that'd be nice. Yeah,
that was one population I was concerned about, and particularly women veterans, actually. Or women who might have returned to the workforce but lost their jobs during the pandemic or whatever. It's 55 plus.
Well, that's what we do too. For the most part, it's 55 plus. And it's nice because this building is very close to Beltran Living Center.
I know, we can walk across the street.
Yes, and so, you know, in regards to transportational services, congregate food services, lots of partnerships possibly.
I know, you've been talking with St. Paul Center about the support services, and that's an important component. Diane, it's easy for me to build these. It's very hard to run facilities like this, as you know. So that's the challenge, in making sure there's the right support services to keep the building nice for, we went 25 years plus, you know. And
being in the middle of the pandemic, needs and wants have changed dramatically.
We're looking at different ways of constructing buildings. Kind of in keeping what we've been doing. One of our focus has been, or my focus has been, trying to make our buildings fossil fuel free.
Nice.
So the larger the rooms, the easier they are to heat and cool with electric, HVAC systems. So, and that is in keeping with airflow, getting a lot of open windows,
right.
you know, ventilation in the building. So this is going to be a zero fossil fuel free project. We're going to do about 100 plus solar panels on the roof. We do have gas coming in the building right now for the first floor, which we'll probably keep in place. Sure. Unless we discover we can eliminate it, then we will. Yeah. But it's something we have to do.
Right. Oh, I agree. There's got to be that responsibility, yeah.
So there's a lot of cool things going on.
So we should actually introduce your co-guest here who's sitting on your lap. Now this is Sable, right? Yeah, yeah. So can you tell us what kind of mixed breed, and she's a girl, 3 years old you said?
Yes.
Yes.
She's a Yorkie Havanese. And Havanese are a breed from Havana, Cuba. And my sister in Buffalo, her dog, she rescued a couple little dogs, and this is the result of that. She has a sister, Cuca. She's got a Y-shaped mark on her chest, so we named her Cuca after Lake Cuca. Yeah. And she goes to St. Paul Center a lot to play with the kids and moms and boss everybody around, but she actually runs the construction company. Yeah,
well, it was funny. So when Michael was setting up the cameras, Sable would let him get so close, and she did growl at him once, like, okay, buddy, where you going?
She hasn't bitten anyone yet.
No, but she's very protective.
I guess, yeah, she's alert. Yeah.
Well, I think having a pet is pretty cool. Yeah. So let's back up. So where were you originally from?
North Tonawanda, New York.
Okay, and where's that around?
Well, it's right on the Niagara River, in between Buffalo and Niagara Falls. Right. So I grew up on the Niagara River, actually on the Erie Canal, because the Erie Canal stops at the Niagara River. And my dad owned a bar in Tonawanda, and we lived in North Tonawanda, so I had to cross the canal every day to get to work, because I tended bar for him when I was in college.
Oh, that's very cool. Now, what's the population of Tonawanda or North Tonawanda?
It's a city, the city of North Tonawanda, okay. So it's probably right around 100,000, maybe less. Really? But it's very suburban. It has a little downtown, which is cute, with a movie theater, and I guess being on the canal, it's really picking up. And when I was in Buffalo, I left in the late 70s. There was a lot of pollution. The canal, it was kind of green, but it's really nice now. A lot of money and effort has gone into restoring the canal. The Niagara River looks beautiful. Nice. I was disappointed when I moved here because I thought the Hudson would be more recreational. It's not.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, not so much. But we don't have access to it. You know, we have to create that. Yeah. On the Rensselaer side, there's more opportunity, I think. But I know Albany's doing what it can to make the river more accessible, which is really good because it's a resource. Oh, it's a tremendous resource, and to have that waterfront. And I did crew at one point, and so I was always hesitant. I never wanted my hands to go in the river. No, yes, that's what I thought. Yeah, right. I'm going to touch it. I was going to grow an extra finger or something. We used to do cleanups down there. When I came to Albany, I left Buffalo. I went to the University of Buffalo in political science, and I left there thinking I wanted to be a lawyer, and I attended a year of law school in Massachusetts and hated it. Okay. So I transferred to RPI and started my master's in urban environmental planning. That 1 year of law school has helped me a lot in terms of contracts and things of that sort. When I finished my master's, I was offered a job in the south end of Albany, South End Improvement Corporation, which is a not-for-profit. And I stayed there throughout the 80s to the end of the 80s, and then City of Albany had me put together some housing programs for them, and I went back to RPI. I was working on my PhD, which is not finished. You always got time. Oh, the dissertation. Oh my God, no. I was planning director of Albany's Community Development Agency for a little while, replaced a woman, Mary Burke, who came to work for Colony. Then after I finished, well, I didn't finish that. While I was there, I was focusing on homeless housing. AIDS in particular was a problem in the late 80s, early 90s. So the city wanted me to focus more on economic development, and I preferred to work a little more on homelessness. So I left and formed my own company. One of the reasons I did that was because I used to pass out a lot of government funds, community development block grant money.
Yeah.
And I would often be disappointed at the quality of work that we were getting from the contractors. There was a lot of general contractors. No one was really into construction management back then. And I felt that construction should be managed as a business. A lot of younger, and mostly men, were on the projects that we were funding, and they weren't keeping track of the finances. They didn't know what their costs were. They didn't know what their income was. How do you survive, right? So I think, no, this is a business, kind of like being in a bar. It's a business.
You make sure you're making a profit.
Yeah. Which goes back to my name of my company. I started writing grants, because I am a grant writer, for not-for-profits that wanted to produce homeless housing. And Father Peter Young approached me and asked me if I could provide or build some housing for men coming out of prison who were HIV. So we found some buildings on Clinton Avenue, and I wrote some grants for him, and he said, well, Nancy, now that you have the money, you should hire my men to construct this. And I'm like, Father, you need a construction company, you know. He said, well, you do that. So I thought, okay. So I set up a construction company. And said, Father, I need like 7 strong men on the curb at 7 in the morning. And I pulled up, and there was one little old guy, and he tipped his hat, and he said, good morning, ma'am. And I said, good morning, what is your name? He said, Tommy Malarkey, ma'am. And I said, okay, Tommy, where are the guys? He said, I think you better let me pick them out for you. So we went back to Father Young's office, and we interviewed some of the people that were in his program, and mostly in drug and alcohol recovery program, and brought the men, focusing on men again, on board as a crew. And I loved it. I loved it because it gave me control over the construction, you know, control over gutting the buildings, which is really difficult. It's a very fussy thing. You got to be careful, you know, because of what the older buildings, you know, the materials could be contaminated. So at any rate, I had to name the company something. So Father had, his housing development corporation was Vesta. So I named my company Vesta Construction. And just kept it that way. I was incorporated for a number of years, and I switched it to an LLC. And slowly started weaning some of the guys and saying, you know, you should get your own insurance, you know. And I think we had about a 50% success rate.
Wow.
I thought that was good.
That's wonderful. That is impressive.
We've done a lot of different projects throughout the years. I've worked for many, many not-for-profits. And it's been an interesting career.
So do you have any of those original gentlemen that you worked with? Are they still involved in anything you're doing?
I don't know what Tommy's doing. I hope he's still alive. But most of them have moved on. And I miss it in a way, but I'm also, it distracted me because I was trying to keep work going to keep them working. And I wanted them to be able to create their own work too. Which frees up time for me then to do the grant writing. So that's been very helpful for me.
I mean, that's such an emphasis on social services, if you think about it. So you're trying to gainfully employ people, give them an opportunity to learn something so that they're not going back in jail and looking at other options for themselves.
But interesting, Diane, that I haven't been successful in creating any opportunities for women in construction. I think women have, it's particularly difficult because of children. You know, they're not going to take risks, you know, to leave a job to come into a job training program for construction, and they have kids at home or whatever. They don't have that flexibility. So it's been very difficult for me.
Well, I'm just wondering, how has it been? So you'll probably go into a meeting, you might be the only female sitting at a table.
Usually.
Okay, all right. So
usually
are they receptive? I mean, has that changed over time?
Oh boy, oh boy. You just got to put your big boy pants on and ignore the fact that if somebody doesn't want to listen to what you're saying, you can't convince them to do it. But you have a mission. Every day you have to get your job done. So, you know, you work around it. You work around it when you go to the lumber yards and, you know, you're 35 years old and no one will help you load your truck with the lumber because you're taking work away from a man. You know, that kind of an attitude. So, you know, live through that. But still, there's not a lot of women going into construction.
Yeah.
And I'm not exactly sure what the problem is. I wish I could put my finger on it.
Yeah.
I think that the income is good, but I think it's also, you have to be able to get to your job sites, so transportation becomes an issue as well. And in addition to the child care, I think those are two of the biggest stumbling blocks. I've ignored the difficulties.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you bring that up. So I had done a restoration project, and I was, and I think sometimes women have geared more towards the detail piece.
Oh my God, they're very detail-oriented.
Right, usually. I don't
Yeah.
want to just, And so I was working with a couple of people and then an economic development person in a municipality, I won't say which one, went to introduce me to another developer, and he said, I want you to meet Diane. She's the most aggressive woman I've ever met in my life. And so this developer looked at me, looked at this gentleman, and looked back, he goes, do you mean assertive? Like I was going to punch him or something. And so it was, and that was probably 20 years ago, that rarity of, okay, what is she trying to prove? And which is too bad. I would hope that would change.
I think one of the things I'm noticing recently, which is really bothering me, is people aren't listening to you. They're not listening to your voice. I'll be in meetings now where I'll make a statement, and then maybe 5 minutes later, one of the men sitting at the table will make the exact same statement, and everybody's listening. I'm like, didn't I just say that? Well, maybe, I don't know. But they're not listening. And they'll leave the room, they'll leave the meeting, not remembering anything you had talked about. And I think that's a problem across the board.
Right.
Globally.
Right.
She's going to jump down. Yeah.
No, maybe. She's
being a bad
deciding.
girl.
Sable's like, oh.
You should have stayed in the truck.
It's all good. Yeah. So, were you an only child? I'm curious.
No, 6.
Wow. And where were
Polish
you?
Catholics.
Okay.
I was a middle child. They actually, when I was 10 years old, my family actually moved and forgot to tell me.
I'm sorry.
It's true.
They leave you behind?
Home alone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was a middle child. You get ignored quite a bit. And oh, she's okay. But my
How
father,
far away did they move to?
3 miles away. I had come home from school. We lived across the street from the elementary school, and they were gone. Oh, God, they moved. So I got on my bicycle with my saxophone, pedaled till I saw the big mounds of dirt. My dad had built a home 3 miles away, and they hadn't backfilled everything yet. Got there, all locked up. They went shopping. They didn't notice I was gone till who knows when. It was getting dark already. They came home. So yeah, so 6 kids. You do get lost in the shuffle. 4 sisters and a brother.
Okay. Now, where's the brother in the lineup?
The baby.
Oh, okay. All right.
Oh my goodness, yes,
Yeah.
the baby.
So I think I told you this. I'm one of 5. I have 4 older brothers, and I'm the baby.
Okay, you're the opposite.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely opposite. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're all different parts of the country doing different things.
That's good.
But it was a good upbringing. I mean, I don't think I've had any struggles really in my life.
Well, that's fortunate.
Not really.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything, Diane. I mean, my parents made sure we had, clothing and food and a nice place to live, and they wanted us to help in the bar and to work hard, and they taught me how to clean and how to how to clean a bar. I did briefly. It was for about 10 years. Buy a building in Albany on New Scotland Avenue, and I thought, I'm going to get out of construction. It'll be nice to be in a building where I don't have to worry about the weather and schlepping lumber around. And so I thought, it would be nice to have a little restaurant here. Oh yeah, so it was nice. So I had a lot of fun gutting the building and putting in cherry floors and mahogany floors and wood-burning fireplaces and a grand piano and jazz and everything that I liked decorating. Forgot one thing. I didn't have 6 kids to help me run it. It was tough, and I realized, and during the recession, it became tough for restaurants. I realized that I missed the construction. I missed the creativity of construction. And so I sold the restaurant to a nice couple, and they're doing very well.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, you had the courage to take the risk.
Because I could.
Right.
I didn't have children to worry about.
Right.
I mean, if I had kids, and this is where, women in the workforce, I can definitely see what the problems are. It's scary.
Yeah.
Because it's not just you.
Mm-hmm.
I could say, well, I don't care. I'll leave the city. I'll leave my government job with the city,
Mm-hmm.
and set up a company and write grants if I want.
Right.
Because
Well, you always had something to fall back on. Yeah.
Well, yes, but it only affected me. I wasn't. I didn't have any other responsibilities,
Mm-hmm.
so that made it easy.
I think women are less apt to be risk taker overall, generally speaking.
Yeah, and they're afraid of money.
Yeah.
They're afraid of more zeros. It doesn't matter how many zeros are in there.
Right.
Yeah, you can't be afraid of money, and maybe because they've been marginalized through banks.
Right, and that's a possibility. And the worst thing, you fail, right?
Yeah.
You can always pick yourself up and try something else. You're never going to be without options.
Exactly.
But I think oftentimes we put ourselves in that bucket, like, oh my gosh, if this doesn't work, what am I going to do? There's always something you can do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's going back to school or doing a job you weren't anticipating, but sometimes then comes opportunity.
And pace yourself. I think a lot of people starting out, if they want to be self-employed in business, as soon as they start making money, they start spending money. I mean, I didn't own a home until I was about 40.
Yeah.
And I was building, housing, affordable housing. But I knew I couldn't. I knew I had the construction company. And that's where I did have responsibilities, because I had employees.
Right.
And I had to keep, I had to keep them working. Mm-hmm. So, be a payroll.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
right. I'm curious what got your interest in helping. So you want to do this construction company, you want to make a mark, but then you're also saying, well, I want to help those people who are struggling, who don't have homes themselves. I want to help people who were incarcerated and have an opportunity. Where does that piece of you come from, do you think? You sound very empathetic. And maybe you were brought up that way, or maybe something had happened?
I think partly it's the upbringing.
Okay.
I know my dad's bar in Tonawanda was a 2-story building,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a post office historically. And
it's a nice combo, bar and post office. Did they do that?
I think we should have more of those, don't you?
Belly up to the bar, get your mail.
Mm-hmm, yeah, but I had all these. She's barking. I had all of these uncles who would live upstairs.
Were they really uncles?
No, they were just poor and homeless men.
Okay, so your dad was empathetic.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, but he didn't realize he was, because in his mind, my career, he wanted me to be a lawyer,
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And I chose a different path, and that was disappointing to him.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't think he understood why I was doing what I was doing, but it was more challenging, Diane. I mean, I could have worked in economic development, but it was harder. It was more challenging to develop housing for people with special needs.
Sure. Still is?
Yes, and also, it's something we have in common is, I wanted to try and preserve the buildings, the environment.
Yeah.
I love cities. I grew up in North Tonawanda was small. It had a small downtown, but when you leave North Tonawanda and you see everything else, it's like, oh wow, this is really cool. And you want to do something, but using these old buildings, adaptive reuse, finding new life for the buildings, that was challenging too. So, it's instead of ripping everything down, the number one premise of green building technology is use your existing resources. Do not rip a building like this down and build something new in its place, because energy went into building this building, and you should preserve it.
Right.
And I think for people that live in the communities, when you do that, they're so appreciative of it.
Yeah.
Because they'll see that structure every day,
Right.
and they'll see it throughout the years. Maybe it goes downhill. Usually we find buildings that are in pretty rough shape. And all of a sudden they'll see this new life, and it's familiar to them, and they love it. They love the history of it. So, I think the path I chose was just for the challenge, and maybe through my upbringing, a concern for people who weren't as fortunate. As I said, I don't think I struggled in my life. Not to mention, there was nothing that I can think of. But there are people who, through no fault of their own,
Right.
They find themselves in circumstances, and there are some people through bad behaviors find themselves in bad circumstances, but then what do we do about it?
Right.
Don't ignore it. Don't let it go by the wayside.
Right.
I mean, we all have to work together here.
Right.
We can't rely on government to do everything either.
Yeah.
It's a lot of what I'm doing now, especially with the restaurant and with this building, is trying to reinvest my resources, like this building, into the community.
So nice adaptive reuse.
Right, and you know, what's the alternative here? I'm 65 years old. My partner, Tony, is 65 years old, and we have one younger partner who's 50. But, you know, we could have sold the building. But, I mean, there's a higher and better use for this structure. And for me, it's continuing the investment. It's been a nice investment for us for 20 years. And, okay, she's going to bark. Come here. She's bossy, Diane. I don't know what to tell you.
She does run the company, doesn't she?
She does. She's like, get over here. Come on.
It's all right. It's all good. It is all good. So I'm curious, what advice would you give, and we'll concentrate on women, a younger woman or a woman who's really not happy where she is in her chapter, and you know, I'd love to learn about construction management or economic development or something where it's usually not a woman's realm. What advice would you give them?
To ignore those obstacles.
Okay.
Ignore the people that aren't listening to your voice.
Yeah.
You can't force them to listen.
Right.
You know, like when you're a kid, make them stop looking at me. You can't make your sister stop or brother stop looking at you, right? But you have to ignore those obstacles and just do what you think is right. Otherwise, you'll make yourself crazy. You'll be resentful. That'll always be an obstacle for you. And it's their obstacles, not yours. You know, it's the people that are imposing those restrictions, their bias. So you got to ignore it. Make sure you can take care of yourself and your family before you venture out and do anything different. I would say take it a step at a time.
Right.
And don't spend all your money as soon as you make it.
That's right. Reinvest in your structures.
Oh, and your business.
Yeah, and your business.
So many people do. The brand new truck. It's like, how do you have a brand new truck? Look at my truck. 10 years.
Get every mile out of it you can.
Yes, yeah, true.
Yeah. Well, Nancy, I want to thank you for the opportunity to sit down and learn a little bit more about you. You're really an inspiration in this community, honestly. I'm just so impressed with your life path, willing to share, and that you're continuing really on your legacy of giving. So on behalf of Colony Senior Service Centers, our staff and board of directors, I want to thank you for participating, and let's have a conversation.
You're welcome, Diane. Thank you.
Thank you.
The dog thanks you. She's had it.
Thanks.
She's had it.
I know, I was like, oh my God, please don't bite my